Hey Simon, how are you?
Hey, oh, we're doing all right, Kashi. Is that correct?
You got it, sir.
Y-
First of all, thank you for doing this. We're looking forward to our
Thank you for the
conversation.
opportunity.
Um, I'll give you a quick background
Mhm.
of myself and what we're planning to, our goal here is, and then we'll jump into it. There's a few housekeeping items, and then we'll jump into it.
Okay.
Um, I'm from Austin, Texas. I've been in the corporate world for some time, and
Hmm.
one of the things I came across was, like I'm dyslexic, and
Hmm.
my goal is to build a platform that has resources, access to a community, and support
Hmm.
for dyslexics, right? So I'm in
Yes.
this journey, talking to individuals, and one of the things I noticed was there's a lot of clinical level information that's out there. I
Hmm.
am looking for the practical ones, right?
Yeah.
Because
It's nice that the docs have
yeah,
finally gotten around to understanding and starting to figure it out and all, but
exactly,
that doesn't do me any good. I still have to
exactly.
be in the world. Yes, I still have to be
Yeah.
in today's world and
Yeah.
here
Plus, I'm
now.
not going to read those documents too. It's difficult for me to read. It. So
I
that's
found
where.
some things that help with that, by the way, and
Oh,
it's really been a
yeah.
blessing along the way.
Okay,
We'll get
we'll
to
talk
those
about
down the
that.
road. We'll get to those.
Yeah.
But I
So
appreciate it. I mean, it's yeah. Somebody hands you
yeah,
that, and I go, okay,
yeah.
yeah, right. You expect me to? No, no, okay.
Yeah.
Along
I
the.
was talking to someone yesterday. We were doing another spotlight, and
Hmm.
we were talking to someone, and I said, in my corporate world, I've told the teams, like, if you send me a paragraph long email, you lost me. Like, put it in bullets, and if I had to scroll the email a couple of times, you lost me again, right? Like,
Hmm.
just. So I
Yep.
had to tell my teams, and those are like tips and all how we navigate the world. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do is spotlight and showcase,
Hmm.
one, how we integrate tips and hacks that we all kind of self-taught
How
ourselves, right?
we were able to adapt to the world that doesn't understand us
Yep,
is the way I look at it,
exactly.
and I still get that. You know,
Yep,
I've known. So yeah, quickly before we get in, I've known for
yep.
over 45 years that I had the issue.
Hmm.
Um, and that, you turn to people and say, oh, great, by the way, and I was eventually formally diagnosed with the issue, with
Hmm.
the dyslexia. But I looked at the person. So what else? Oh, have a good day. I'm just kind of like, okay, how do I what I do?
Right.
What how and so I've had to learn. So along the way,
Okay.
I've had to figure out what works for me.
Yep.
It may not work for you and it may not work for somebody else, but it works for
Hmm.
me. And that's the
Yep.
important thing. I think the most important part is you have to kind of work through what will work for you. And if it doesn't work, dump it. Get rid
Exactly.
of it. That's not going to work. You're not going to make
Yep.
that fit you, no matter how hard you try. But I want to help people along the way. And part of my journey and understanding what it is that made the world so hard for me,
Yep.
and now it's time for me to share that. It's time for me
Yep.
to share things that will make it. Maybe somebody down the road won't get that. Oh, by the way, you have this. Have a good day. Instead, they'll get. Oh, by the way, there's this place. Go look here. I was impressed in my time and frame that there was nothing but what I ran across on LinkedIn in the way that the British have approached the problem and
Yep.
apparently have embraced it and there are a number of issues. And I don't know what's driving that, whether it's their education system or whether it's otherwise, but I've certainly found a lot of things very interesting that have come out of that along the way.
Absolutely. Simon, thank you for being part of our podcast.
Mhm.
What if you could just start about providing your background about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so I've had a long and strange trip, and that's not a pun on the wonderful song that comes in a long, strange trip we've been on. Dyslexia is a long, strange trip because the world's not geared for us. And so, a little bit about me. I grew up partially in England and partially in the United States, and my education started in England as a very young child and all. I was there until around 9 to 10. I don't remember the exact time when my parents came back to the States and all. And then at that point, I went through three different school systems. And when you start seeing the same problem over again and over, you kind of realize there's something going on here that's not right. There's something that doesn't fit. The first attempt to fix me was a reading class where they were going to teach me how to read words and enunciate them. The only thing in that class that I can remember is the audio books that they had. Those were great and all along the way. I love those, but I can't remember anything else that they were trying to teach because it didn't fit with it. Later, as I worked my way through the education system in the United States and eventually receiving a high school diploma and then going on to college, I was reading recommendations about what it is, what could be the best. And at some point, I basically said, this is the end goal is as far as I can get, whatever that is. I will get to that along the way. Very curious, very scientifically oriented. My terminal degree is in the field of chemistry. It's actually physical, but it's the third degree attempt. It took me 3 tries to get to that end goal. So perseverance is one of the efforts that one needs to bring to the table. And one of the things I think, be patient with yourself and be perseverant along the way. And I think it's the way I look at it. My spouse and I, I'm officially a member of the Society of Friends. That came from my high school days. So that's the one that didn't throw me out. I got pitched out of a lot of religious service, but that one didn't pitch me out. I think that's probably because I like everybody to be friends. So they kind of kept me along the way. But my wife is Buddhist, and we practice along the way. And I find her meditation work just as good as other things along the way. But I don't make that as an emphasis on others. And I certainly don't make it as an emphasis on individuals as a whole. So that's a little bit about me. What I basically ultimately did is I started out as a curious scientist kid. I want to know everything, how everything is put together. I got enough phones pinging here to crush the bell. So I apologize for all that extra pinging you'll have to figure out how to get rid of. But along the way, so my bachelor's degree was in biology, and I pursued a first attempt at a graduate degree was developmental biology, which was fascinating, how we become what it is. That was unsuccessful. It was a complete failure. But one of the instructors that I had recognized the similarities with an individual he had worked with in the past and insisted I go to a testing clinic that was sponsored through the university I was at the time and be tested. And that's where they determined that I was formally a dyslexic. And it was also one of the things, I guess one of the parting things in that was that I did not read for recreation at all. And people don't understand it because the page to me doesn't stay still. It's one of those things where I actually ran across this on one of the websites. I think a wife found it. She found it, said, "Is this what it looks like to you?" And said, "Oh, the page is fine." And she says, "No, the page is dancing." I went, "Oh, okay. It's not dancing for me, but it is for you because I track that. I track that dance and I can follow you. Anybody that's tried to read through something and gets to the frustration point because words are dancing all over the page. This was a reverse of that. It was very interesting. The second attempt was a little bit more successful, but unfortunately, due to a condition of allergic response to the animals, I chose the field of pharmacology. It was biology, and it had been working in the gentleman that I was working for as a laboratory technician, thought I would make a very good candidate for an advanced degree. And I explained that, I had these issues, we'll work through them. He was very patient with me. Unfortunately, the rats got to me before the degree did. So I left that one. And now I had to choose something that had nothing to do with biology, a field I really enjoyed. And I ended up I figured chemistry was close enough. Pharmacology has 3 main areas of field: biology, chemistry, and mathematics. Whereas the field of chemistry, oh, okay, I don't have the biology, but that should be good. I got chemistry and mathematics. Okay, that's all. I can handle those. Those are abstract enough, and they don't involve a lot of words except for organics. They have all these letter things that just our chemistry symbols become blurs in the background along the way. Although So I chose physical chemistry, which would make highlights of the things I knew and the ability I could make benefit. And turned out I was able to actually finally work that through. Yes, I have participated in the publication of multiple papers, but I've been a limited primary author for the very obvious reasons. It's not easy to write a paper when you can't see the page right. You can articulate verbally what it is. And that's when I discovered things that helped me along the way. But that's a little bit about how I got to this passageway. And it was a few years ago with the help of my wife that I finally decided that enough is enough. I've made enough excuses for why I don't spell something right, or why there's a funky word in there, or something's missing on the page. And I get these, oh, by the way, did you mean this, or did you leave that out of the email? Or I didn't get this part here. Why is it missing? Or why is it spelled wrong? You keep spelling things wrong on the page. I'm like, well, yes, spell checker does work, but it doesn't work when it's a properly spelled word, but it's the wrong one in the page. I don't see that. I have to read it 4 times to see that, oh, yeah, right, that's the wrong word. Right. So the good and beneficial thing to me was spell checking was great. That was the first thing I discovered that was fabulously wonderful. The second thing that I discovered was I could actually talk and it would come out on the page. Oh, that's even better. I don't have to type because typing, yeah, that was a strange thing. It still is, although I have to do it quite a bit. And at work, they don't, my current employer does accept this. And along the way, I think I don't have my work, I don't have my personal email, but in my work email, I've added a tagline at the bottom that I observed on someone who connected with me on LinkedIn. On the bottom of their email address, it said, I'm made by dyslexia. Expect big thinking with small spelling errors.
And in fact, I even added that on my LinkedIn page, made by dyslexia. And people are recognizing that, what I'm seeing is slowly the stigma is being reduced, but it's also at the same time, at least I'm just familiar with the US side of the house, they're acknowledging it privately, right?
Yeah, they kind of okay. But it was interesting since I put the tagline in it. Most of the people they don't see it on the work email. They don't pay attention to that a little bit on it. Even my supervisor doesn't. He's like, I have to explain to him what this means in the way of what I do and what I don't do.
Right.
But I had a group I needed to contact that I didn't normally work with at our work site. And one of them reached out and said, can I steal that? And I went, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
I stole it too.
And so before we go, I really want to talk about the workplace because working in corporate and otherwise there's a lot we could go down there. But before we get to that, just taking a step back, so you mentioned that you were formally diagnosed, took the assessment during your college years, right?
Right.
So how was schooling, like high school and before, right? Just talk to me about that life, and then even in the university, even after being diagnosed, I'm assuming not much tools were there, right?
Yeah,
how was that?
There was nothing there. It was basically nothing other than remedial writing and remedial reading and remedial this. That doesn't solve the problem. So the diagnosis actually came in graduate school. I had been accepted to that. I had achieved enough that I'd gotten into that. So it came up as a graduate acceptance. And in high school, there was a lot of, there's a wonderful promise, very curious individual, but he needs to read more, needs to learn English more, needs to do this more. Is really poor in his writing, really poor in this. But there was never, this is what you need to do. This is how to solve it. That never happened. You just need to apply yourself more. You need to study more. Trying to learn Latin is hard in any normal person. Try it with dyslexia. Conjugate the verb when you're trying to figure out what the letters on the page mean, much less what they make. That's what the frustration, and it's very frustrating. And I can understand, and I have somewhat sad story that came to me via one of the early school systems I was in. There was a young man that I was good friends with and all. And when I was shifted out of that, we didn't really stay in touch. But about 20 years later, he got in touch with me. Apparently, he had gone through the public school system and had been diagnosed at some point when they had begun doing this in the mid 80s or so in public schools. They were actually taking evaluations for that he had the dyslexic issue. And then they apparently handed him his diploma and said, good luck. He couldn't read at a third grade level because of his dyslexia. He just could not read. And he came, I still lived in the area, and he found me. And he said, do you know anything that could possibly help? And I sent him to a group that I thought might be of help. Unfortunately, they were not able to provide any practical assistance for him. But he's actually been very successful as a businessman. He finally found something that he was good at that didn't require him to do a lot of reading and a lot of work. And I noticed that there's some folks that in my high school that went off to work that probably had the same issue, that reading was disrupted by their neurodivergence, as the British like to call it. And I think it's an appropriate way to look at it along the way. College, no, you're on your own. Here in the States, it's, you go figure it out. Yes, there are services now, 40 years later, that are intended to assist individuals who have neurodivergence to some degree, but I have no idea what they're like. I've not participated in them. And I did not use them when I went to because I focused on what I was strong at. I was strong away from English, and I was good at understanding math and theories and logical components. Some things not perfect in there, and the dyslexia disrupts that to a degree, and I have to work harder at it. But I can remember trying to read through text, and one of the solutions that was provided, and I just remembered this, was that Books for the Blind. It's a national service. It's paid for by the federal government. It's free to individuals who are identified as being visually impaired in some fashion, and dyslexia is one of those visual impairments. So for areas now, Audible books is now become big, and there are a lot of different services for that. And I recently just ran across 9 or 10 of them that are free, basically, and provide public library readable books. But I just remembered you can actually get texts that are not available commercially, are read by volunteers, and they read literally the whole text on the page. They describe graphs, figures, and pictures to you as if you can't see it, even though, I could see. And it was actually very helpful. It was the first time that I could actually go through some of my texts and read through them chapter by chapter without having to struggle through them. That paragraph that's 10 lines long, forget it. But now listening to it going, okay, that makes sense. All right, now I'm following along a little bit better. There was the cut out the 1-word slot or the 5-word slot out of a 3x5 card, slide it along the page to obscure. That helps to a degree. But again, it's everything. These are things you try. And if they don't work, drop them, move on to something else. Look around in the network, ask somebody who might be struggling but not realize it. Yep. That formal, period never came. I never asked for anything again after that period of diagnosis. Got it. So I never went out because I couldn't find anything out there personally.
So was most of your undergraduates and mostly like brute force trying to read multiple times?
A lot of it was just certainly brute force. I probably suffered from sleep deprivation as a result of that, and that didn't help matters any. But that was, it was, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get through it, was the mentality I took, because, I don't understand what the problem is. At least I didn't understand what the undergraduate problem. I may have had a hint of what it was. My parents had no idea. They could not assist because it was beyond their understanding as to what this particular was. It was a word to them, and it didn't mean anything. And they weren't interested in looking at it. Not that they weren't caring. They wanted me to succeed, but it was just beyond their scope of what they could figure out to do.
Yeah, I could relate to this so much because I'm from Sri Lanka and I came here to do my undergraduate studies, right?
Oh, and good grief.
Yeah, and so it was challenging to just understand everything. And
Mhm.
so we studied English back home, so that helped.
Mhm.
But coming here, the education system is different. And then, like, you have GPAs and things like that. You have to maintain. I had a scholarship and
Mm.
all.
Oh yeah.
And I had to maintain a certain GPA to get the scholarship. And I'm looking at myself saying, I know I could do this, but why can I not achieve it? Right. So like I'm
Mhm.
putting in the
Yeah.
work, and
But
it
why doesn't
took
it translate that you put in
it's
that extra hours, that longer
yep,
time, you make that extra effort, you make all those little notes
yep,
or things to help you out, and then you sit down to answer that, and it's just
yep,
where'd it go?
yeah,
What
exactly.
happened? I, I, where did it go? Show me. Give me a picture. It's not there. I understand that frustration. I
Yeah.
understand it very passionately. Sorry if I'm get a little excited about it, but yes, I can appreciate your that true frustration of you put all
Yeah.
that work in. I got to get to this point, and there's not an option for me not getting to that point because if there isn't, I'm out of here, and
Yeah.
I can't survive this type of issue.
Absolutely.
I had a lot of, particularly after finishing my doctorate, I was ran a user service lab, and a lot of the individuals came through. English was their second and sometimes their fourth language. Uh, that they had a couple from the Philippines that knew at least three languages when they came in. I had a number of individuals from Oriental countries who two languages at a minimum. Europeans where it might be three or four, depending on the nature of them. So yes, it's one of those things where I was so impressed somebody can learn another language and actually communicate in it. My wife knows four and communicates well in them and fluently in three of them without a trouble at all. And English is one of them, and it gets we converse well. And she's trying to teach me, and it's that point where there's that I need to use, and I can't remember the name of this college, but at the State Department, if you ever wanted to work for them and were a Native American, you would go to this college because they had an immersive language system that guaranteed you were going to pass the State Department test. Basically, once you stepped on campus, you were not given the opportunity to speak your native tongue anymore. You were speaking the tongue you chose as your education form, and everything, all the signs, all the components, everybody in your dormitory, in your classrooms spoke only that language. And that's
Interesting.
kind of the step that you took when you came here. Oh yes, I have had that language, but then oh, what happened? Who got the wrong textbook? Because that's not what
Yeah.
I'm seeing. That's what the wife is like. She came here, she was like, it was like, I don't know what they were teaching me, but it was not what I learned when I walked in the door here. And
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
there's a true frustration with that. And
Oh
but
yeah.
to persevere your way through and be conversant in that is amazing to me.
So, for folks that people that are going through college and
Mhm.
also advanced degrees, one of the things that we've noticed a recurring theme from our audience and also just being active in some forums and all is that they are hesitant to pursue higher education just because of the challenges they face, right? What you and I went through.
Mhm. Right.
What advice would you give them to navigate the world
Right.
while
The
being
world.
dyslexic?
So two things that come to mind. First is the idea of an advanced degree. In the United States is unique in its advanced degree system. Whereas you can get advanced degrees anywhere in the world and they're valid and accepted across the board. They have very, very, very different systems of how that's chosen. Here, once you're in the system, it's not about the subject you chose to get in. So you need to be passionate that you really, really want to do this because you're going to make sacrifices, not just in the learning process, but in your life. This is a commitment to it. Here, an advanced degree is about learning how to think differently from not just stuffing information in your head. Now you're going to address really three basic tenets in that advanced process. One of them is, how do I design an experiment effectively so it actually tests what I want it to test? How do I control for things I cannot control in that experiment? And then the last is the one that's the hardest for us. How do I communicate that to my peers and to my non-peers? Because that's a fundamental part of what you're going to do in that advanced degree. You need to be able to communicate and carry on and pass on that information you learn and do. So being passionate about that. I'm very vocal. I mean, one of the things that I had when I moved into the world of safety from the world of chemistry was, oh, you have to give talks. Is that you okay with that? I said, no problem. I'll stand up. And I've stood up before 500 people and given a talk on safety without actually having, so where are your notes? I don't need notes. I interpolate things. So sometimes instead of giving, that presentation with a chart or a bunch of flashcards or whatever
Yeah.
else, talk to you about it. Let me talk to you about this. Let me sit down. So that's one thing. Get them to talk to you. Look for support groups that'll help you understand certain areas. Use the tools that are now widely available that I never, audio books, book readers. I use natural reading now. I find it amazing. I can put any kind of a PDF into this device and it will read it to me. It does have some drawbacks. Yes, I have to pay for it to get a voice of appropriate type, but I'd rather pay the yearly fee for that and sit there and listen to it while I'm going the road reading it, and I'm building that whole story in my head because I'm very audible. Somebody might not be. They may be more visual. I need to see more visual arts. So watching a show that's related to it might be better for them. And yes, there are things for scientists as well as for the non-science advanced degrees. Terminal degrees in the arts can be effective along the way, and individuals that work in those areas. Use other resources for developing written documents. If you need to, uh, I couldn't, Dragon Speaking was like God sent to me when I first discovered it, but I couldn't afford the thing. So I was always using the free version of it. In college, you
Yep.
don't have a lot of funds, and trying to get by with that as much as I could. And then sitting there long hours trying to make the document look right. Writing a dissertation was fairly easy in the science world because we take all of our published papers, put them together, and then we write an introduction and a conclusion, and we're done. Uh, that took 4 months each side, but I got it done. Persistence. That's the goal. You really want to get to that point, be persistent. Medical school actually is very visual. Yes, there's a lot of stuff things in it, but most of the medical school people I've talked with, there's a lot of visual things, a lot of hands-on. I worked with a number of them in the pharmacology field, and the classic was you see one, you do one, and you teach one. All of those can be visual. They don't have to be in a textbook. Yes, they're going to ask you textbook questions and they're going to put you in front of a test seat. And I always say the only thing a test tests for is what I can do that day, that time, and that moment. It doesn't test my brain's logic. Your dyslexics on a whole are more intelligent than the rest of the group. Sorry, we're the ones skewing it to the other end of the chart. And I've met some amazing ones. When I realized that some along the way, particularly Richard Branson, who's now very vocal about it, and he's been very public about his, but I've been amazed at the number of actors, artists, as well as scientists who said, yeah, that's why I did this particular science, because I didn't have to read and write a lot.
Yeah.
I went to there because that wasn't part of what it is. Or I stayed away from the mathematics and I instead went into the visuals because I can't do math. I believe my wife is probably dyscalculic. If you talk to her numbers, she's got to write them down, and she's got to carefully order them in order to put them. And I see that in me when I'm writing, and she sees me writing, and I think she's seeing the same thing along the way. That
Yep.
comes through. Okay, so
It's
move on.
speaking of which, we did some spotlights on our social media on
Mhm.
some famous dyslexics and also Olympians, right? There's so
Uh-huh.
many Olympians so we were
I
doing
was
and
surprised this year. I've
yeah,
seen a number of them say, "Oh, by the way, I'm dyslexic too." I'm
yeah,
like, huh?
yeah. So it's very encouraging, and like I said, it's I'm glad the stigma is like slowly getting reduced.
Yeah.
So let's transition a little bit to work life, right? And I would say let's start off with, I think where you started about the natural reader and talked about
Hmm.
some of the tools. If you could just expand on that, right? What are some of the other tools, hacks, etc., that you use to kind of navigate work
To
to be
navigate work,
successful?
yeah.
Yeah.
Email's a big issue and always has been. What I'm doing right now is I'm hunting for any kind of odd. For me, hearing is excellent and it improves. So for me, natural reader is an excellent one, and then I have any of the uh, apps that are associated audio books, Audible, Gutenberg, um, Libby Library, Libby Vox, uh, are all apps that I've used that read books to me of various types. And they have varying amounts of free and not free. Some of them, I'll have to pay for. Audible, you got to pay for the books or pay for a membership along the way. So that could be a financial strain, but there are free ones out there. If one puts into a search engine, free. Chat GTP and its similar species have started to show that they are actually very helpful. And so instead of having to type out a full question, I might say, I need information about X, and put it into the GT instead of trying to go through a Google or Dogpile or other type of search engine, which all have AIs behind that front, but I got to type out those words. I don't have to type out as many with the AI-based programs. I found them to be very beneficial, and they also you can talk to them. My wife will often pop hers out for and speak to it, asking, "What about this information?" And she'll look at the screen and go, "Oh, okay, that all right. So there, can you give me more on this particular topic?" Those are beneficial ways that I use at work. Oftentimes, I prefer to talk to people rather than sending emails. So we now have sort of an open environment. That's bad for me uh, because there's chatter all the time. And when there's chatter, I'm distracted. I can't focus on the page. So yeah, I'll stick in headphones to try to avoid that. But I can still pick it up. I'm that sensitive. I hear things. My wife goes, "What are you looking at? What did, because my auditory is enhanced because it's beneficial to me. Some folks find that it's not the case, that they need to see the visual arts better along the way. But I'll get up and go talk to somebody rather than type a 5-line or a paragraph long email. Uh, it's I have to sit down and I still have to work through the process. I would prefer to have a closed office where I could talk to the computer more than type to the computer, and I would get more things done. And they understand that, but that corporate has its bottom line, and it's more worried about than it is about my little problem of needing to talk. So we have little quiet rooms. I'll go there and take the laptop, plop it down, and start talking to it about an issue that if I have a long uh, paper I need to work on or a long piece I need to work on. If that doesn't work, we now are allowed to do a little remote work. And so I can come home and I'll sit here in the office while my wife's at her business and I'll talk to the computer about generating papers and watching or video rather than trying to read a page. That's some of the skill sets I work with. My workers are a little more understanding, but it's still a mystery to them. They don't understand what neurodivergence is to begin with. And then I'm talking about dyslexia. So I don't remind them beyond the email. But if they start, they hand me these long, "Oh, you need to read this thing." I'm like, "Okay, where's my reader at?" And I'm going to have that sucker reading it to me. So the car doesn't play much music. It plays a lot of, "Oh, the latest report from so and so is being read to you." Oh, really? You had to make it that dry? Couldn't put in something interesting in there? A joke or two? That would be helpful. Uh, at least lighten the day. I was like, so my favorite joke about writers is one I heard on Jeopardy many years ago. It was probably 30 years ago. It was a lawyer. He apparently collected jokes, and his favorite, and I agree with it, it was a lawyer writes a document called a brief that's 5,000 words long. I'm like, that's a novel to me.
It
That's like
is.
a major encyclopedia. That's not a brief. I want to know who you're briefing. Zeus, the gods of Olympia. What's going on here? And so
You
that's the
lost
joke.
me after the third sentence. Yeah,
That's
I
right.
agree.
I agree. Yeah, I'm gone. Yeah, along the way.
Yeah.
Uh, so
So,
that's one of the things I do. So I tend to be, for my benefit, I go and I talk to people. I want to meet with them. That can be frustrating in the days of, people want to be at their home office or whatnot. Zoom helps. And of course, we use also a Teams thing. There are other ways to meet. Those can be beneficial, particularly if you can see a person for face to face to some degree, and there's no real lag. Today we're really good. You haven't frozen yet.
yeah,
Yesterday I had freeze all over the place in half a dozen team meetings. I was like, okay, this is not doing really well. We'll wait. And then the person will start talking again. It's like, okay, you missed the last 3 minutes of your talk. Can you give us a quick synopsis on that?
yeah,
And that's something that gets, that they
yeah.
miss.
Have you, if you're using Windows, have you used the immersive reader capability on
I
Word?
have not used that on Windows. I've used when here of late at my current employer, my previous employer, I did use that. I would
Okay,
plug up the headphones and have it read me emails. And that was helpful to a degree, although it would then read all these little things, down the bottom of it and the top. And I was like, I don't need to know who I can see who it's sent from. Thank
right.
you. Yeah, that came up on my thing very nicely. It's in my system, but it has to read me all those lines. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
like,
oh the hashtags or whatever
oh,
that's all there.
it's
Yeah,
like
I see
stop,
those too.
stop, click, click,
Yeah,
click.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've gone through those. So what would
Okay.
you say that from a workplace perspective, what do you think would be is lacking or would benefit us from having, or what should
I
employers
think
provide? Yeah,
and I'll speak from my particular situation, one of which is to understand that sometimes, although it's convenient and it may be a short-term financial savings, you need to provide more than just a desk. You need to provide a place or a space sometimes where we're permanently housed away from distractions. There is certainly neurodivergents who are ADH. I don't think dyslexics per themselves are. I think our brain, my wife will say, you switch gears so fast, I can't track you because I have 15 things going on in my brain I'm aware of. I can keep them in my mind and I'll go, oh, wait a minute, what about that? Okay, that relates to this. This relates to that. That's that big thinking that most people don't. They are very linear at work. And so they think, okay, everybody else is too. No. Uh, One of the professors I worked with on, particularly on molecular dynamics, molecular systems, he would say, oh, well, it's this, it's doing this. And he'd kind of start explaining. And I'd say, well, you mean it's going to end up looking like this? And he would look at me like, how did you know that? Because I've already worked it out. I've already gone down that path because I've had these pieces percolating around in my head. And now they're all together because I've seen this one little piece. Boom, there's where it's going to end up. And he'd run the model and go,
you're
we
right.
don't need the model. We just need you sitting around. I was like, no, because I want to do some other things. I don't want to sit here and try to cogitate all these pieces together. But workplace doesn't seem to get that. They seem to think we're very linear. We're going to sit there, read that email. We're going to respond to the email. We're going to write that report, and we'll go down to the next thing down the list, down the list. And I'm like, I have my list goes horizontal. It doesn't go vertical. I need. I remember this little issue here, and it's related to that issue over there that you just brought to me. And now, I'm working on this little project here and I'm working on that piece there because they're all going to fit together. Eventually, they're going to funnel right into an answer that's going to lead to an end piece there. And the workplace is like, no, you go from here, A to Z, down the list. You go orderly. No, I go A, Z, B, E, F, G, or whatever, 9, 10. And I'm all, and they said, what's 88? No, it's not ADH. They're all there. I'm not leaping from one thing to the next thing, and not doing. They're all there. I know where I started on it. I know where I'm going to it because I've put it into the system. It's that
Yep.
I call it the spheres of instead of linear. It's the spheres, and work doesn't understand that.
Yeah,
They
I could
do
relate to
when
that.
Yeah, he's got
Uh,
all the, yeah. Oh yeah, I got this thing here. I got this. It's
yeah,
not the parent who has 10 kids and they're trying to remember what all nine of them are doing and
exactly.
where's the 10th one at. It's
Yeah.
they're all there and you know where they are and you can see, okay, where's this one? It's the, the classic one of the mother who has eyes in the back of the head.
Yeah.
They grow that magically, by the way. I think it's set this grown right back here. My favorite
Uh,
was the story of the kids who came up looking behind mom's back. Where's that eye she's got in the back of her head?
Look,
Well,
what you said, I could relate to because coming from a technology background, I sometimes in meetings I just be there for folks to catch up because I kind of gone through the process, right? But
you're already
just
at
have
the
to
end of
be,
the meeting.
yeah,
Okay,
I'm there,
can I work on something else?
right?
Would you mind if I just work on?
Yeah,
Because I'm already there. When you get catch up to me, yes,
yeah.
I've seen it so many times.
I'm
It,
so glad you said that. I never heard someone else say that until today, Simon, right?
yeah.
But it's one of those things like it happens to me all the time. And I
Mhm.
tell my wife sometimes, right? Hey, I was just waiting till they caught up to this because I was done, right?
Right,
And,
you're
but
done, and
yeah,
and yeah,
in these
no,
meetings too.
it is it's one of those things where that's where the patience comes in sometimes
Yep.
because I'm trying to explain something and it's very complex to my colleagues in science, and they're struggling to follow step A to step Z. I'm at step double Z down the way,
Yep.
and I'm going, okay, how do I explain to you to get to you to get to there?
Yep.
And I can see the ones where it's beginning to, you can almost see it in their eyes, like, oh yeah, okay, that's the part. Oh, oh, okay. No. And it's like, okay, what? Try again and
Yeah.
work on. So that's where I have to be patient with that to a degree.
Yep.
And I had one, it was wonderful colleague's mother. She looked at me and she saw me sitting there doing one of those things where I'm kind of being quiet and I'm sort of sitting off and waiting for the conversation to finally come back to that where I'm sitting at. And she leaned over and said, "You know the answer, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, 10 minutes ago." And they all stopped talking. They all turned and looked at her and went, "What do you mean?" It's like, uh, we need to work our way to it. But in our world, because everything's there, we tend to get there very quick. And I certainly understand how some rather famous researchers and scientists have been, although not formally diagnosed, the evidence of the way they worked pointed towards the fact that they were dyslexic
No.
because of the way they think.
No.
We don't think in a linear fashion for as a whole. I think we tend to think it in it's like I call it the waterfall effect. Everything's going over the waterfall, and we're going right along with it because we know where everything is going to be when it gets to the bottom of that waterfall. It's like pool. And we're all going to go off. When they all come to join me, we'll move on.
Yep. Good
And
analogy.
yeah, and there's that point. I also have to remember. Okay, the boss is working through this. Patience. Wait for it. He'll get there. Oh, he went the wrong way. Okay, let's see what can I do to shift him back into the right location and all. And the better bosses are the ones that will allow you to shibby them in the right direction. When they don't, and they say, no, this is the answer. Okay, it's time for me to go hunt for somewhere else to work because this is not going to work in the long run. I have learned that if we can't get on the same page, and generally speaking, even though they're the supervisor and the boss, doesn't mean that they got there because they have some magically better thing than the rest of us. One quote I remember reading decades ago was a startup time in the 2000s. All the companies in the world, everybody's going to be an internet company. But this company actually was working on, I think, modern robotics. And they had a whole mess of multiple advanced degree people with. And the gentleman who was tasked with seeing they stayed on finally came to the realization that they're seeing the world completely different from him.
Yep.
And then when he realized that, he said, okay, I have to kind of see how they're seeing it in order for me to keep them on track or
Yep.
at least understand where they're going with their track. Is that getting to an answer that is financially beneficial to the company and will make a success out of it? Or are they something very interesting, but not relevant? And that's where he finally realized, pay attention, explain, I'll get there. And then when I get there, I go, oh, okay, that is a good idea. I mean, it's probably not a great idea, but interesting nonetheless. So on. So okay.
Good.
As you can tell, I can really I talk a lot and I tell a lot of stories and I keep people entertained. But
no, this is good. Three more
that's okay.
questions.
Go ahead.
So going back to the workplace, one of the things you talked about, which resonated again to me, was about public speaking and how you approach public speaking. So I'm curious, right? Because this is one selfishly for me as well. I've gone through town halls and all, and had challenges like they put a prompt up there, right? And it's not going to help. So how do you prepare for public speaking, and what tips do you have for someone that's dyslexic?
So when I've given a number of talks along the way, and I become famous for a couple of things that I do. One of which is I never carry notes with me. So I've intercalated the topic well enough that I feel comfortable enough. I'll make slides for everybody else because they always want to see slides. And as a general rule, there's not many words on those slides. I don't want they're keywords. I point to something or I bullet out a list. I don't want my audience to read the paper. That's not what I'm presenting. I'm presenting you the key points, what I found interesting and that I think you will find interesting. So that's the emphasis of that public speaking that I come to. All right, so what does my audience think is going to be interesting? I've sat down with colleagues who, very well respected senior members of science communities and given talks that had them rolling and laughing and else. Because one of which is told to me decades when I first started through school, and one of the companies I worked for and people with the researchers said, remember, whenever you give a talk, everybody in the audience is naked. They don't know what you're going to talk about. They know a subject that's related to it, but they don't know what you're going to talk about. So everything you give them is new. Yeah, it might be retreading old areas that they're familiar with, but you are the new person. So treat it as if they're naked. They don't know. So I'm giving you a whole new look on this subject. And that whole new look is what you choose to share with them. So don't worry if, I wanted to say something and I forgot, or, I'm not really sure this is the right way this goes, but I thought it was very interesting, by the way. And, I've made that mistake too. I've stood up there and said, I enunciated the fancy long word and blew it. Went, okay, well, I didn't do that right, gang. Anybody want to help me out? And surprisingly enough, half a dozen go, this is the answer. When you're talking in public speaking, one, know what you want to say and however best to know that. But don't worry if you forget something. The audience doesn't know what you forgot. They don't. So yeah, I go through it and I'll go, I'll start talking about something. And by the way, this is a figure. Whoops, wrong one. Click. Oh, there it is. That's the right figure. Because they want to know you're not superhuman. You're not this magical robot. They can get that on the internet all the time. There's plenty of these presenters or whatever things that never make mistakes. We're human. We make mistakes. So that's one of the biggest things. The other thing is I found that if I can get you to laugh, you're going to remember my talk. You will remember a key point. So when I know there's something I really want the audience to grasp, I'll set it up as a joke. Now, whatever I find funny. Don't worry if they don't laugh. But if you can get them to go smile, you've got them to remember that point. That's the takeaway on it. Because I work in the world of safety, it's very important that some things be remembered. So that's a point where I make an effort to make sure I can get my audience to laugh, because that's a lock on an average person's brain. Oh yeah, I remember it. And I've had people come back when I was teaching. My area of my final degree was in spectroscopy, specifically laser spectroscopy. And I work extensively with laser materials and lasing and the aspects of that. So when I migrated into safety was through that, because there wasn't really an effective safety. And it turns out I was getting my degree at about the time safety for lasers was getting steam. So we kind of married together. So I made sure there were things that I missed that are critical that I want to make sure the audience gets when I teach laser safety. The class was 3 hours long when I ended up teaching it. And they were like, well, that's a long class. So we took a break in the middle for at least 15 minutes or so. Everybody get up, walk around. I make them get out of the room and come back on it and go through it. But I had people coming back every 2 years to sit in that class when they didn't need to, because they could take it online. Why? Because they enjoyed the talk, they enjoyed
Yep.
the interaction. So that's what you want to, if they can enjoy it, you have your audience. You've got them in the palm of your hand. And you do everything silly you wanted to, and it wouldn't matter. But they would remember those important events. So public speaking is a matter of realizing, for me, it was just simply, oh, don't worry about it. What you do up there, they have no idea what it's going to be. It's different every time. I gave one paper 3 different times, and it was 3 different talks. It's 3 different emphases. I was like, okay, I forgot that part. Oh, whoops. Oh, that's right. I was going to tell you about that part. Oh, is anybody interested? No. Okay, we'll move on. No, and interact with the audience. So I don't stand at the podium. That drives me nuts. They give me a mic and a podium, and I'm like, no, click off. I'm going. I say, I'll tell the moderator. I said, I'm not going to stand at that podium and talk to these people. I'm going to walk around that stage, or I'm going to walk amongst them, because I want to see their faces too. I want to interact with them. And if they feel that I'm not the super crazy geeky science guy up there, or the safety cop who's going to arrest them for doing something wrong, then they see I'm just another person. I was tasked with giving a talk because it's important for you to have this information. That's what it is about. So I don't know of any other tricks I can give you, but that one, once you get past that, then you figure out the ones that'll work. Whether it's a little prompt card in your hand or teleprompter that I don't want to see, I've actually turned them away. I had one that was in the stage behind me, and I just put my notebook right on top of it. I bring one along, not because I'm going to read from it, but to hide things that I don't want to see. They often put now the monitors in those stands, and I just put it right on top of it. So I don't have this flickering light going over here. You're supposed to read this stuff. That's the slide that's up on the screen. I know what's the slide is. I made it.
Yep.
As long as I know where I'm at on it, and I'll periodically, I'll turn around and go, okay, we're on this. And so I know which one is up there on the screen that they're seeing, the audience seeing. I don't need to see the teleprompter. It's just going to distract me. I want to read those things. Oh, did I make that? Is that spelled right? Did I make another spell? Oh, okay. It's a mistake. Okay. So acknowledge it and move on. Your audience is going to forgive that. What they won't forgive is being dishonest with it.
Right.
They won't forgive that. But if you can be honest with them, okay, I'm going to have some trouble. And sometimes I had one of the individuals at a talk I was going to give in Austin, your former city, the University of Austin, and it got cut out along the way. But he said he saw my LinkedIn profile. He said, did you want to talk? I said, yeah. I'm at a point in my life now where I'd rather share that. That, by the way, I got to hear despite this. Despite what most people think is a handicap, because it's not a handicap.
Right.
I don't see it as a handicap at all anymore. Yes, I saw it as difficulty because I was told it was a problem. When I started out, oh, you're just not doing enough work. I'd done all that hard work, and it didn't make a damn bit of difference, because that's not the problem. The problem is I'm wired differently, and that's just it. Accept it. And okay, I'm wired differently. I have to figure out what works for me. Sometimes that'd be really helpful. If I'd had some of those resources early on, it would have made things a lot easier, and that career life would have been different. And I'm sure it would be for many a dyslexic along the way. He would say the same thing. Yeah, but in the end, I really like what I did. I really like where I've gotten to, and I'm really proud of where I've gotten to. And I think every dyslexic should be, no matter where it is, no matter where you are, be proud that you've achieved what you've achieved so far, because it's quite a lot. You stop and start looking back down that road, that's a long, winding road you've come down.
I agree.
You achieved an awful. Anyway, go ahead.
That's true. That's true. And this is a perfect segue into, if you had any closing thoughts, right? So far you've covered everything from, your life going through academia to career to just
Mhm.
basic navigating the world. This has been very helpful for me too, because there was a lot that you either confirmed or I have a lot
You're not
taking away.
crazy. You're not.
Yeah.
No, you're not crazy.
Yeah. So what closing thoughts do you have to leave us with?
So I'll try to be succinct. Don't laugh too loud. Everybody does along the way, and they should, because I do, as I said, I talk a lot, and I talk with these. When I learned the Italians in northern Italy talk to the French this way, I was like, oh, great, I need to go there, because that's the way I am. I'm talking with the hands all the time, and whatnot along the way. So there are wonderful things in it, and everyone in life will run into difficulties, and the perseverance, I think, is the biggest goal out of that. There's nothing that's fixable. I heard that so much in my early life, childhood. We need to fix this problem. No, you need to figure out how to work with those that don't understand the problem, and how to communicate with them. They're going to hand you things that, okay, that I can't read this. How do I get around that? Where is there an AI, an app? But most importantly, is you are a good human. You have some challenges because the world's not fitted for us. It doesn't understand how we think. And so things are difficult. Keep persevering. Find an answer. Listen to the podcast. Look at websites if you can, have them read to you. There are plenty of website readers, and there are plenty of dyslexic websites available. Dyslexic, made by Dyslexia is one of the very good ones. There's a dyslexic talk system out of England. It's also quite good. They do a number of podcasts along the way, and listen to what folks have used, the tools they've used to solve the problems. You'll find an answer, but persistence and perseverance is what's going to do it for you. And I'll leave it at that for now.
That's perfect, Simon. So thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. This was a really
I
good
appreciate it.
conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad I was able to provide at least a modicum help for one, if not for many. Have a great
Thank
day.
you, Simon.